is called production. So now in economics, we want to find out what best way there is to produce a good or a service. You don't just produce anyhow. Any monkey, any whatever can produce anyhow. Because resources are scarce in economics, we want to produce in such a way that we reduce as much waste. Reduce as much waste as possible. And then to produce the best as much as possible, the best bean cake possible. So the good must be the best possible, and then the waste must be the least possible. Okay? Because as we reduce wastage, we reduce cost of production. Cost of production will be the next thing we are going to discuss next week. So now, what is the definition? Now, the topic is theory of production. Definition. Theory of production or production theory. Now, please, can you mute your mic if you are discussing with somebody else? Okay. Now, what's the definition of production economics? Production is any activity that results in the creation of a good or a service. It's a series of activities whose aim or outcome is the production of something useful to somebody else, a good that somebody needs to buy because they need to consume them. So production involves the creation of utility. I don't know, very soon you'll discuss utility. I don't know whether I've discussed it or you're going to discuss it. Utility. Now, you buy a good, you want to buy a good because you want to consume it. You want to use it. In economics, we use consume. You want to consume it. Now, you want to consume it because it's going to do good to you. In other words, it's going to give you utility. Okay, you will see that we measure this. It has theories, etc. That's not the lesson for today. But the point is, if you are buying a Coke, if you are buying whatever good it is, you are buying it because you enjoy it. You want something out of it. And that thing you want out of it is called utility or satisfaction in economics. So you want to satisfy a need or a want. So somebody has to produce that good through which you satisfy your need or your satisfaction. I mean, your utility or your satisfaction. You have a need, and that need must be satisfied. You have a want, that want must be satisfied. And the good you are going to buy to satisfy that need or want must be produced. Now, for example, somebody may ask me, can we produce mangoes? I'll tell you yes, we can produce mangoes. What you need to do is, if you have a piece of land, you plant a mango seed, the mango seed grows and then turns into a mango tree, and then you pluck the mango trees and then you take them to market. You have produced mangoes. Okay, it doesn't mean you fried them, doesn't mean whatever. Not everything will be fried anyway. Okay, so just understand the concept. You may produce a car. Doesn't mean you fried a car. No, car is not bean cake. So you have to understand how something is done. So that means in economics, we need to be very, very curious as to know how cars are produced. Okay, you go to a factory, you just watch the way cars are produced, so you'll be able to understand the process or the concept, and then how to explain to somebody else. At any rate, any good that you produce, any good, you take raw materials, you transform the raw materials into something useful for somebody, so they come and demand for that thing, then you have been involved in production. Okay? Now, we have basically two types of production. We have what we call direct production, and we have indirect production. Direct production is carried out in a small scale, like agriculture for subsistence. That is not something small. Okay? That is direct production. Indirect production is production by sophisticated means, technologically advanced means, modern means. You see, in every, whether it is direct production or indirect production, always remember the example of that lady frying bean cakes by the roadside. That's production. That man selling or roasting corn by the roadside, because not always women. At times you have men doing that. That individual is involved in production. Mandilas, who's producing cars, is involved in production. Dangote, who has a refinery and refines crude oil into derivatives, into products, is involved in production. Now, the car manufacturer is involved in production. The aeroplane manufacturer is involved in production. So production could be basic. That woman by the roadside preparing whatever, soup and gari, and selling by the roadside is involved in production. Selling in Mama Put, that's production. So you need to understand what we call production in economics. So you'll not be limited in your thinking. And when calculations come, not at 100 level, maybe from 200 level, you see the principle is the same. That's what I'm trying to say. Whether small scale, whether the woman roasting plantains by the roadside, maybe she has only 5 plantains she's roasting in a very small corner, etc. She's involved in production as far as economics is concerned. Dangote, whose refinery you cannot cover on foot, is involved in production. They're doing the same thing. They are producing a good or a service. And that good is useful to people around. That is why we say it has utility. All right. So labor is paid for his time and skill. That woman who is preparing bean cakes herself is labor.
What is this one now?
If she hires somebody, a young girl to help her, or a young boy to help her, it's not in the youth, could be an old woman to help her, or whatever. That woman is part of labor, the one helping is part of labor, and at the end of the day, she would be paid. In fact, she must be paid. Okay? So why is she paid? She's paid because of her skill. Or the man helping is paid because of skill. The woman doesn't have a helping hand, then she has to pay herself because she's doing that job. In economics, please don't bring in your sentiments here. We are telling you what economics is, and you have to learn it that way. Whatever you knew before, now, whether good or bad, well, if it is good, fine. If it's bad, you change your thinking. Okay? You have to start reasoning like an economist now, from now. So now, indirect production is is classified into three basic units. We have what we call primary production. Then we have what we call secondary production. And then we have what we call tertiary production. Primary production forms the basis for further production. That's the basic. For example, I produce mangoes. I'm not a tree. I plant a tree, and then my tree grows, and then I pluck mangoes from that tree. I have produced the mangoes. And maybe I'm into agriculture. Okay?
Oh.
So I have produced mangoes. I am into what we call primary production, because those mangoes may be taken, some of them will be eaten when ripe, but most of them may be taken to a factory for processing. From the mangoes I have taken to market and are bought, we have mango juice, because those mangoes will be taken to the factory, and then the factory, they use things, we call that machine or physical capital. That's not the point for now. They'll be transformed into mango juice, okay? So they're primary products from primary product. They belong to the primary production. So mangoes would be called raw material. Then that raw material will be processed. They'll add some things, etc., passing through a machine or whatever. At the end of the day, we have mango juice, then we have jam, we have this, we call them derivatives. There will be so many things, or a few things, that will be produced out of the mangoes we have taken to the factory for production. Okay, so that's primary production. Now, it has to do with extraction of raw materials from land or air or sea. For example, you go to the river, you catch fish. That's under primary production. Air, whatever it is, maybe you catch birds or whatever it is that you are looking for, that you need as a raw material so you can produce a good. Okay? And then land, of course, we have an example is the mangoes that you produce from land, cassava that you produce from land. But that's not all. These are called agricultural products. But you have much more. If you dig up the land, you may find gold, you find silver. These things have to be refined. So that all on, I may find crude oil. There's so many things. So when you dig the ground, you get them. Okay. So that is under primary, and are classified under primary production. Now, secondary production, what do we have? Involved in secondary production means we're involved in we or anybody else. And basically we call that labor, and then labor is organized by an entrepreneur or a businessman or a manager or whatever. Okay, we're going to get into that. But getting into secondary production is getting into or involved in the conversion of raw materials. Mango is a raw material. We've used that. We get mangoes, take them to the factory, convert them into jam, mango jam, convert them into juice, mango juice, convert them into whatever. Okay. So the conversion of raw materials into semi-finished or finished goods. So at times, you'll not be able to, or you'll not want to produce a good that is finished. So you produce it halfway so that the person buying it from you would go and continue the processing or the production. Okay? For example, I sell rice. I have facilities to parboil rice. It's not fully boiled, it's parboiled. It's not as raw as it was before. I parboiled it, then I have somebody else who pick it and go and boil it, then sell it to people. Okay? So I have sold out a semi-finished product. The accountants call that, I think, work in progress. Okay? So I'm not done yet. I've done my part, I've sold it out, and then the person buying will have to do it, finish processing, then the good is ready for consumption. For example, if we were in the car business, what I'm going to do is take the raw materials, then make parts of make that part, make that part, make that part. Then once that is done, I am not involved in making a whole car or producing a whole car, manufacturing a whole car. I'll just do parts of it. Maybe doors, maybe bonnets, maybe this or that. And somebody else will come. That person will come and buy those parts and couple them together into a whole car. Okay? So the parts I've sold out, we call them CKDs. That's not what you are involved in. We're not interested in that. The parts I've sold out will be coupled by somebody else in a factory, and then he will produce the cars. But he didn't produce the parts. I produced them. So my own part of production is what we call semi-finished. I didn't produce a whole car. I produced semi-built. Okay. So that's that. Primary, secondary production, then tertiary production. Now, with tertiary production, tertiary production covers commercial and professional services. So if you are into the services sector, then you are in the tertiary production, into tertiary production. In other words, a barber belongs to the tertiary production classification. Then a driver belongs here. A lawyer belongs here. Once you are producing a good or service, once you are producing a service, then you are into tertiary production. Okay? So you have primary production, you have secondary production, you have tertiary production. Tertiary production falls under services, drivers, lawyers, lecturers, all under, tertiary production. They offer tertiary services. Secondary services are into reproduction, manufacturing, for example, processing, for for example, road construction, for example, bridges, for example, etc. Then under primary production, you have the production of raw materials that will be transformed into semi-finished or finished goods that will be secondary production. Then if you have things that would be used beyond secondary production, you have tertiary production. So let me limit it. Examples of those involved: doctors, you have lawyers, lecturers, even the one typing your letter. When you go to a typing pool, when you cross over to the whatever there, and then you ask somebody to help you type a letter or type a project, that person is into tertiary production. Now, we said the woman who is preparing bean cakes for sale is into production. Now, what does that mean? That means she has to take raw materials and transform the raw materials. Here, beans, oil, salt, pepper, charcoal, if you're using coal, that burner she uses. If she's using charcoal, there's something she uses. Then it goes. She's using gas, there's a gas burner, and then a gas bottle, and then with gas inside. If she's using firewood, they have firewood and a stand, and so on. So now, all those things put together are called factors of production. All the things we need in order to get involved in production, whether at primary level, secondary level, or tertiary level. All the things we need are called factors of production. Now, in economics, we categorize them into four. One, I told you the woman or the man selling by the producing whatever by the roadside needs to be somewhere. And that's called land in economics. So to get involved in production, you need land. That means you need somewhere to be in or on to produce a good or a service. Okay? Then you need labor, somebody to get involved, either you or other people, you hire them or whatever. You need human beings to do that job. Now, of course, you will need robots or whatever for people who are very advanced, etc., and who have the money. But you'll see that robot is not a man. So it's not classified as labor. It's a machine. So it's going to be classified under machines. Okay? So you need land. You need the human beings. Land, that means where to stand to do your work. Dangote refinery is on land. If I want to produce mangoes, I need land. So I'll sow my seed on land, and then the tree will grow and start producing mangoes. I need land. If you have a school somewhere, you need land for your school to be somewhere, because in schools you produce services, okay? So if you're manufacturing cars, you need land. You need a place, a location. We call that land in economics. The labor, the people to do the job, the human beings to do the job. Then you need capital. Capital, I'm going to break that down again now. Capital will have to do with all the machines you need. If you have a robot helping you in your production process, then that robot, because not a man cannot be classified under labor, will be classified under capital, physical capital. And then we have the fourth factor of production is entrepreneurship or enterprise or management or managerial ability. That is the people who organize all the other factors of production for production to take place. Okay, so we have basically 4 factors of production. You have land, you have labor, you have capital, you have entrepreneurship or enterprise. Now, land. How do we define land in economics? Now, when we talk about land, we talk about what you can walk on if you are walking, if you are trekking. You trek. What you trek on is called land. But that's not all. Rivers are considered to be part of land in economics. The atmosphere, that is, if you stand somewhere and you start flying directly ahead where you are, start flying, going up, up, up. Where you are there is called land too. It's called atmosphere, but it's part of land in economics. Again, your sentiments don't come in here. That's the definition of land in economics. Whether I like it or not, doesn't matter. Land is where you can step on. Land is the rivers around. And land is the atmosphere. Just you think of you flying up. The birds are considered being on land, that is being part of land in the atmosphere. So that is it. Okay? So in other words, it is all nature's free gifts, man excluded. In other words, it is all nature's free gifts, man excluded. So all this come under land. Now, I told you where you walk on is land. Rivers are land. The atmosphere above the land is called land. But again, if you stand on land and then there's a hole, stand deep down, is also called land in economics. Okay, so now, and then your hole goes in, that's part of land. So what is underneath where we stand? Then the rivers, then what is above where we stand? Are all called land in economics. Now, what are the characteristics of land? 1, land has fixed supply in economics. You cannot create land. It's fixed in supply. It is a free gift of nature. It is subject to diminishing returns. We'll talk about that later. And then it is immobile. I-M-M-O-B-I-L-E. I-M-M-O-B-I-L-E. That means you cannot move it from one place to the other. For example, you can move from, say, campus to Yaba, but land cannot move like that, or you cannot move land like that. Land is where it is. Okay? So we say land is immobile. That's one of the characteristics. We've discussed 4 characteristics of land here. You have to remember them. It's fixed in supply, it's a free gift of nature, subject to diminishing returns. So I'm going to come back to that. And then it's immobile. Okay? So land provides man with the natural resources, the primary resources or natural resources that can be used in production. For example, you can bore a hole and get crude oil. There's land that produces that crude oil. You can dig up till land and sow a seed, and after 3 months, you harvest groundnuts. Or you can sow whatever, and then after some time, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, the case of mangoes, you harvest mangoes. That's part of land. So land gives you the basic resources needed for or in production. Now, let's go to labor. Labor is another factor of production. That means if you want to produce goods and services, you need labor for it. You need a human being for it. If you want to plant mangoes, to have a mango tree, you need a human being who would dig up the ground and plant. Of course, now machines do that, but ordinarily, that is the human being's job. In fact, even if it's machines have to do that, you have the human being who has to control that machine, okay? Now, labor is human effort, E-F-F-O-R-T, human effort, okay? Human effort. Now, that human effort may be manual. For example, laborers. If you go to a construction site, you find people carrying things. You don't need to have a BSc or a BA to carry something on your head and move sand from here to the next place. Okay? You may be the dullest person on earth, but once you have the strength to carry sand from one place to the other, you're a laborer. That's manual work or manual effort. Then you have mental work or mental effort. Lecturers, for example, use the mental effort in the production of students, production of knowledge or knowledgeable students, okay? And you may have a skill, or you may be unskilled. You have skilled labor, you have unskilled labor using either the hands, manual labor, or using the brain. So labor is human effort used in the course of production or in the production process. Now, this effort is accompanied by a reward. Labor is supposed to be paid, and labor is paid. Your lecturers are paid. The man carrying something on his head, carrying sand in a construction place from one place to the other is paid at the end of the day. A driver is paid for his services. A pilot is paid. A VC in a school is paid. So once you offer your labor for employment, that labor earns what we call wages. Earns wages, okay? That's the reward for labor. Now, it is the initiator of all productive activities. A man or woman must put all the other resources together and then have production take place. Now, what are the characteristics of labor? One, it is mobile, M-O-B-I-L-E, can move from place to place. Don't have a job in Lagos, you can decide to go to Ogun State. So you have moved from Lagos to Ogun State. So that's what we call geographical mobility, that is moving from one place to the other. Or there may be what we call occupational mobility. Now, you were a driver in Lagos, and now you are fed up with driving. Then you want to do fashion design. Okay, you go and learn sewing and so on, and style and so on. Then now you stop driving for pay. You become a fashion designer, and you earn your living through that. So this is what we call occupational mobility. Now, the second characteristic of labor is that labor can acquire skills through education and training. So we call that skill acquisition or skills acquisition. Okay. So that is one attribute or one characteristic of labor. Another characteristic of labor is that it combines and controls other factors of production. Okay, like a supervisor. A supervisor checks all the other people under him or her, gives them direction, directives, etc., etc. 4, labor is variable in quality. That means if you have somebody with BSc working somewhere, and I have somebody with an MSc working somewhere, those two people have different qualifications. The one with the MSc MSc degree is supposed to be better than at work than the man with BSc. Okay, so you have what we call so labor is variable in quality. For example, if you buy how do I compare now? Just understand, labor is variable. Two human beings with different qualifications will be variable. Even when they're doing the same job, they're not the same person. They're made differently. Then the other one is labor is human. Okay, it's not a machine. When you turn on the freezer work. Once there's power, the freezer doesn't have emotion. Whether a child turns it on, or the owner of the freezer turns it on, or a visitor turns it on, it doesn't matter to the freezer. Freezer has to work. As long as there's power, as long as the freezer is okay. Okay? The only time the freezer doesn't work is when the freezer is faulty or when there's no power. Otherwise, it works, whoever turns it on. And the human being is not like that. A human being is a human being, is emotional. You can turn the human being on and it says, that is just an image, okay? You can ask a human being, come here. Even when you are the manager of a place, come here. And the human being will tell you, no, I'm not coming. Come here. The highest you can do is to sack him or her. But the freezer will never tell you, I'm not coming. Once you turn it on, well, there's no problem. You turn it with power or with itself, it turns on. So the human being is emotional, and that makes a difference between. That's why labor is the most difficult of the factors of production to control. And then labor is perishable. That means, okay, the human beings get old, that's one. And then two, the human being, if not employed, will lose some of the knowledge they had in that area. Or if not employed in a day, for example, if labor sits down doing nothing for 2 hours in a day, those 2 hours are gone. Okay? So you have to, it is in that sense we say labor is perishable. Okay, so capital. Now, capital I want you to be very careful with the word capital, the way we use the word capital in economics. Because if you belong to management sciences or you belong to whatever, you might have confusion. In fact, even economics students have issues when you take courses in management sciences. The way they emphasize on capital and the way they define it is slightly different from the way we. We are waiting for those who are causing this noise to stop. I mean, if you have a distraction, just mute. Put off your mic, okay? So we'll not have this disturbing the class. So capital. Capital is the stock of physical assets. Physical assets. That means assets you can touch, accumulated by society to facilitate production, the production of goods and services. So capital is the stock of physical assets. Physical asset. So when you have money and you want to invest it in business and you say you have capital, yes, but we don't call that capital in economics. To make a difference between that and the physical assets we just talked about, we call that finance capital. And to differentiate the capital we talked about here from finance capital, we call this capital physical capital. We say capital is stock of physical assets accumulated. So these physical assets accumulated are called physical capital in economics. So when you talk about capital, you have two things in mind. It could either be physical capital, which we call capital in economics, or it could be finance capital, which the business people call, they call that financial capital, or yes, they call that finance capital. All right. Now, capital is any form of wealth set aside for the production of further wealth. Again, take your dictionary, take whatever, find out the meaning of wealth as used in economics. Because after this, if you continue with economics, wealth keep on coming, and then you have to know what it is. If you understand what it is now, you will not have issues with that word in future. Okay, now, fixed capital. Now, this capital would be divided into segments. One of them is fixed capital. Fixed capital refers to buildings, refers to plants. Plant here meaning industrial plant. When you go to a factory, okay, what you see there, that's a plant, an industrial plant. Plants, plants. Is the biological plants, right? So the factory, what you see there is a plant. And that's what we mean when we say plant in economics. We mean industrial, but we don't use factory much in economics. We use plant. So you have to know that. Buildings, plants, machinery, tools, etc. They're called fixed capital. Then circulating capital or working capital comprises raw materials, cash in hand, bank overdraft, etc. So along the line, you'll be able to know those items which belong to fixed capital and those items which belong to circulating capital. Now, don't confuse them. You have to know which items are under which heading, which items are under which heading. Now, characteristics of capital. Capital is man-made, is made by man, man-made. It accumulates over time. Two, capital takes different forms. For example, a farmer's seedling, those seeds that the farmer wants to sow are called capital. Fertilizer is part of capital. If you have shares in the stock market, it's called capital. You have savings in the bank, it's called capital. You have a factory. I said factory is English. Industrial plant or plant is capital. You have machinery is capital. So again, but you have to know which falls under which heading. Capital, I told you, could be grouped into, at your level now, group them into two. Take this, place it here, take this, place it here, take this, place it here, take this, place it here. When you understand economics better, second semester, for example, there may be some new things introduced or some new words introduced. So that's how you manage your knowledge until you're able to get to 400 level and know exactly where each one of them is. So the first characteristic of capital is man-made. Capital is man-made. It accumulates over time. That is, it adds to itself over time. Of course, at a point, it depreciates, okay? That is, it loses value over time. But that's not what we are discussing today, okay? So just know that it's man-made, it accumulates, of course, it depreciates over time as well. And then it takes different forms. And then some form of capital specific and immobile. Buildings, once you construct a building somewhere, it is specific. It is in that area. That building cannot move. So specific, and it is immobile. Others flow freely. Okay? For example, fund transfer. If I have money now, I transfer that money to your account for the purpose of business, then that is capital. It flows freely. Can transfer money from one account, one business account to the other business account. Understand that the money you have that is your own, that is not meant for business, is not part of capital. It is the money you have which you mean to use for business. It is that amount of money that is called capital. I have to understand that. Okay, so what is the importance of capital? Of course, because a factor of production, it facilitates production. It helps in the production process. And then two, it accumulates by saving. Of course, we said it depreciates as well. Depreciation takes place with respect to capital. All right. So when we talk about accumulation of capital, we'll have to add. When we talk about depreciation of capital, you have to subtract the amount set aside for depreciation or the degree of depreciation from the capital proper. All right. Now, the last one is entrepreneurship. You can start from entrepreneurship, then capital, then labor. It's not a must that you start with land. It is not a must. Okay? But you can say you start with land because every other thing comes from land, apart from man. Every other thing comes from land. So entrepreneurship. An entrepreneur, a man or a woman, is the driving force, the manager, the organizer, the risk taker, the man or woman behind production and movement of goods and services. Without the entrepreneur, all the other factors of production will lie fallow, will not be used, will just be dormant. You need somebody who has a vision, who has an idea. Say, okay, oh, you come, you do this. If I take this, add it to this, I'm going to get this, and then I take it, and it will be sold, etc., etc. So he is or she is the entrepreneur. Entrepreneur should not be confused with entrepreneurship. The entrepreneur is the human being who galvanizes all the other factors of production for the purpose of producing a good or service. Entrepreneurship is the idea. So don't confuse entrepreneur with entrepreneurship. Don't think they're the same thing. The man who gets involved or the woman who gets involved in putting up further factors of production to putting them to work, so a good or services, is the entrepreneur. But the whole concept is entrepreneurship. Okay? So now what are the characteristics of an entrepreneur? One, he or she organizes productive resources. Two, he or she is a risk taker because you get into a venture. You want to produce goods and services for sale because you want to make a profit. But at times, you lose. You put in 100,000 naira. At the end of the day, you realize you have only 50,000 naira. So you've lost 50,000. So it was better for you not to have gotten involved in production at all. Because the money you took in, half of it is lost, for example. Okay? So it's a risk taker. He or she generally non-conformist. That means they're stubborn. We call them stubborn. That is, they're just stubborn. They don't take instruction because they have an idea which we don't see and maybe which we don't appreciate. Okay? Just look at entrepreneurs. They break barriers. That's what the English say. They break barriers. Okay, they do new things. So if you see an entrepreneur, well, misbehaving in quotes, just wait until maybe he stays up all night thinking about something, working on something. You may not see, go and sleep. Say, no, I can't sleep until I finish this. So allow them. At the end of the day, you may see what they've come up with. Okay. And then he's a decision maker. He makes decisions or he takes decisions. Now, we said factors of production are organized for pay. That means each factor of production earns something. Okay? The earnings of land are called rents. In other words, the woman by the roadside must rent that place. That means she must pay money to somebody for using that spot. But if she's by the roadside and the roadside is owned by government, nobody can go there to ask her to pay for rent, except it is a tax collector from government. Okay? Now you have in Lagos, particularly Monile, who come and say, okay, look, you pay this for this, you're using this. They really don't have that right. Okay? So land earns rent. Labor earns wages. Capital earns interest. Then entrepreneurs, an entrepreneur, two entrepreneurs, for example, entrepreneurs earn profit. So you'll have rent, you have wages, you have interest, you have profit. Now these four words will be coming over and over again. Maybe you are into labor economics, these words come up. You are into financial economics, these words come up. You are into development, these words come up, etc., etc. But they are all
We should write
earnings
our name.
earnings that accrue to factors of production. Now, rent is very tricky. Well, all of them are tricky. But rent may be divided into, say, three concepts. One, commercial rent. Commercial rent is what we have just discussed. When you pay for the use of a property, that piece of land, or a spot where you're selling, or whatever, you call that rent. That rent is called commercial rent. Rent. We call that economic rent. Economic rent is any payment made to a factor of production over and above what's necessary to keep it functional. I'll take it again. Economic rent is any payment made to a factor of production over and above what is necessary to keep it functional. Now, what does that mean? That means there's an overpayment over a factor of production. How do we know the extent of overpayment? For example, if I'm to buy a good from you and you tell me it's 100 naira, and then I remove money, 100 naira, I'm supposed to give you 100 naira. But in giving you the money, I gave you 200 naira. I didn't know I gave you 200 naira. You will tell me you have overpaid me. I say, how? So you gave me two. So 100 naira is overpayment. How did I know 100 naira is overpayment? You gave me 200 naira. When you were supposed to have given me 100 overpayment. So here, economic rent will be the payment made to a factor of production overpayment, over and above the necessary. I paid you 100 naira over and above the 100 naira I'm supposed to have paid you. So now, you know a demand curve, you know a supply curve. The normal demand curve, I said, bring paper so you can draw some graphs. Now, if you draw x-axis, which is horizontal, y-axis, which is vertical. Now, y and x-axis are mathematics. In economics, we don't use x, we don't use y. Okay? We use The vertical axis could be price, could be anything. The horizontal axis could be anything. But in this case, write Q on the horizontal axis and write P on the vertical axis. That means, suppose you have a good one to sell. So you have to have the demand curve. A normal demand curve slants from left to right, downward. A normal supply curve slants upward, left to right. So they meet at a point. That's equilibrium point. Okay? Now, from the equilibrium point, we see that draw broken lines parallel to the price axis, and then touch your two axes, equilibrium quantity. Now go back to E, draw broken lines to touch the P axis. Those broken lines should be parallel to the Q axis. Okay, you touch the P axis at a point. We call that PE. So we call that equilibrium. The point of equilibrium is the point of agreement. That means at this point, either quantity-wise or price-wise, the demander and the supplier have agreed. Okay? And then when you look at the supply line tells you, we'll call that a locus. It's a locus. It is the set of all the points, supply line, set of all the points where quantity, the amount of goods supplied by the supplier, let me see, how do I explain it to you now? Now, if you have a line, then you have dots, 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 dots on the line. Every dot will represent the amount of goods a supplier is ready to supply at a given price. So every dot, just like the equilibrium point, could be broken down to two, quantity and then price. So the supply line tells you all the points, all the quantities which the supplier is ready to supply at every given price. So if the supplier pays more than the equilibrium, than the price at which the supply is ready to take, then that becomes economic rent if you put all those together. How do I put all those together? I put them very easily. If you have, I've told you, bring a pencil or a pen, you are going to draw. I want to draw from somebody's diagrams, you take them for granted, you may not even understand. So I have my P here, price line Q here, I'm drawing. I have the supply line, of course, origin O, supply line SS, slanting from left to right, upward. You have the GD curve, slanting downward from left to right. These two lines meet at E. I draw broken lines going to QE, touching Q. Then I draw broken lines parallel to the Q line, which is horizontal, touching P. I call that PE. Now, the supplier is ready to supply along the supply curve. And the supply curve is all the points, all the quantities which the supplier is ready to supply at a price. For example, if you take the first point, just pick a point on your SS curve, draw broken lines touching Q. That'll give you Q1. Then draw broken lines touching the P line, P axis. That'll be P1. So the supply is ready to supply Q1 units of this good at the price P1. Then go to the right of Q1, called as Q2. That means it is a line from the supply line that touches the Q line, Q2, because it's to the right Q1. Then that'll give you a line that touches the P axis, called that P2. Now, what does this mean? If you call the first line equivalent to the line, if you call the first point on the SS curve, call that A. At A, you break A into Q1, P1. The next line to the right of A, call that B. If you draw broken lines touching the Q axis, call that Q2, and then P2. You see that the behavior of this man or woman supplying is that if you pay him or her more, then he or she is ready to supply more. Okay? So there will be a movement from A to B. Okay? And then to get to the equilibrium point, you have to supply, you have to pay more for B to move to E, for example. If you understand that, then that's a very good beginning in economics. Because when we don't understand these things, later on we have problems with them. Okay? So the more you pay, the higher the price of a good, the more goods the supplier in this case would want to supply under normal circumstances. That's why we call this curve normal SS curve. Now, okay, let's leave the GD curve aside. So the supplier is ready to supply anywhere along the supply curve. Price quantities. P1 is ready to supply Q1. P2 is ready to supply Q2. PE is ready to supply QE. And you see, QE is greater than Q2, is greater than Q1. Now, what do we call economic rent here? The economic rent would be, now, go back to equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. Now, the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity simply means that the demander is ready to pay a price, PE, for QE quantity. In other words, if you want to find out how much money the demander wants to pay, you have this rectangle or triangle, depending on how you plotted it. Go from 0, move up to PE, then move up to E, move to the right to E, then move down to QE. That gives you a rectangle. Okay? Look at it. You move from 0.
You go out and you tell me that
Move from 0
up
along the P line. Get to PE,
then
move to the right to E, and then move down to QE, then move back to the left to 0. Now mark that rectangle. That rectangle stands for OP times OQE. OPE times OQE. That is the total amount of money it will cost the demander to acquire, to buy QE product. Okay? So, but that would be the total revenue for the 10 units of those things. Then that's 15 naira. The 15 naira is a cost to me. By the way, the next lecture will be cost of production. So if I start talking about cost now, I'm digressing much. Okay? So now the demand would be PE times QE, say 5 times 10 is 15 naira. And that's the 15 naira that will pay to, there's the revenue to the supplier. 15 naira will leave the demander and get into the hands of the supplier. And then the supplier will take 10 units of good and give them to the demander. Okay, if you understand that, that's very good. Now, but understand that this is equilibrium. The supplier was really ready to be paid. Look at it. If you've drawn your diagram, you see that this rectangle is divided into two triangles. The triangle O, E, Q, E, and the triangle O, P, E, E. So if you called this triangle OPE T1, OPE, E, call that T1, OE, QE, call that T2, then you see that the rectangle is divided into two triangles, T1 plus T2. Now, you can find the area of this triangle, T1, and you can find the area of T2. Now, what you paid, the demander paid to the supplier is T1 plus T2. T1 plus T2 will make it 5 times 10, which is 50. That's the example we used. Okay? So, but really, what is supposed to have paid to the supplier is triangle T1. Sorry, triangle T2. So the triangle T1 is that excess in knowing. So that triangle T1 is what we call economic rent. So it took me all this time so you can see what we mean by, and you see, we use a lot of triangles, we use a lot of, we call that, what do you call them now? We use triangles, we use rectangles, we use whatever, geometry. We use a lot of geometry in economics to explain some concepts. So that triangle T1 is what we call economic rent here. If we were to calculate it, you would draw it and then calculate, of course, from 0 to 5, and then from 10, if you took the whole rectangle, that would be 5 times 10, 50. But here, it looks like this rectangle can be divided into two equal triangles in this case. So you simply divide 50 by 2. If you remember your formula for the surface of a triangle, then you know, remember the formula, use that formula to calculate, you get the same result, okay? So I've sent you back to your calculations. You cannot divorce, you cannot take away mathematics from economics, because mathematics helps us understand economics the more. So I've spent all this time to explain to you the concept called economic rent. So the next one is called quasi-rent. QUASI, made to any factor of production that is temporarily fixed in supply. that's temporarily fixed in supply. For example, you have mangoes. Time, just imagine you could tell how many tons of mangoes will be available in the economy. But this is temporary because this is not the season of mangoes. Okay? When the season of mangoes comes, we have mangoes almost everywhere, for example. So the price, look at it. The payment made to any factor that is temporarily fixed in supply. Mangoes, when they're out of season, they're temporarily fixed in supply. Okay? But when the season comes up, then that the supply of the mangoes increases. Okay? So when the supply of mangoes is little, that is not much, prices go up.
As mango come out,
Prices go up.
okay,
When it is time for mangoes, for example, prices are supposed to come down. So the price you pay when mangoes are in short supply, and this is temporary, that price would be called quasi-rent. This payment is temporary, is expected to disappear when supply increases or improves. So when any factor, not only mango now, when any factor of production is temporarily in short supply, the price you pay for it, which should be different from the price you pay for it when it is in full supply, that price is called quasi-rent. You have to know these things because you're going to apply them in future. Okay, let me pause and take a question or two. You have to be very fast because we have so much to do. Okay. I need to take a question. You have to teach, or you can, you're mute. What's your question? Yes, what's your question?
Okay, so I don't really understand the difference between quasi-rent and economic rent. Can you like state
An
the
economic rent.
Yes, sir.
It's a very simple thing. It's a very simple thing. What marks quasi-rent? What makes quasi-rent different from economic is that economic rent may exist whether the good is short supply or quantum supply. It doesn't have to do with being short supply or not short supply. Quasi-rent has to do with something being temporarily in short supply, not only short supply, temporarily in short supply. They have two different frameworks. Now, if you've drawn the economic rent framework diagram, now I didn't want to get there, but let me give you the diagram for something that is in short supply temporarily. Now, the normal demand curve, please draw the x-axis and the y-axis, and then the origin, O. The y-axis is called P. The x-axis is called Q. Always start with the x-axis. Q, then P. P stands for price. Q stands for quantity of a good. Now, under normal circumstances, the supply of this good has a curve. It moves up from left to right. It slants upward. If you've done that, then if you've done that, now just move from the starting point of your SS. Just draw a line, just follow that line up to a point, not complete, up to a point. Stop at a point, then take your ruler or whatever, draw a line that is parallel to the price line, and that from that point up. If you draw that, then instead of SS now, you have called this S O, call that SA. SA, that is from left, move right following the supply line, stop at the junction between the supply line and the line you have just drawn. Call that junction A, capital A. Then move up. Call the point up B, capital B. So your new line now, when things are normal, you have the line SS, call that supply line. It moves from left to right, climbing. That is SS, is upward sloping from left to right. When things are normal. Now things are not normal, but it is temporary. So you'll move from S from the beginning, that's when things were normal, following the SS curve, you get to A, that's the point where things stop being normal. And then from A to B, that's the new supply curve. The new supply curve now would be SAB instead of SAS. That is SAB. Why SAB? SAB because things are temporarily bad. Now, if you need mangoes, for example, under SAB, SA, things are normal. AB, things are not normal, temporarily. When things become normal, this line AB will disappear. Then the line, you'll continue from AS. SAS, that's when things are normal. SAB, that's when things are abnormal. From S to A, things are normal. But that was in the past. From today, point A, up. So anywhere here, the mangoes. All right? Otherwise, you don't have them. So when this temporary condition disappears, maybe mangoes after about 2 months, for example, mangoes are now in much supply, then this AB will disappear, and then these things resume normality or normalcy. Now, you ask the question, do you understand that? The person who has the question, do you understand that?
Yes, I understand, sir.
Okay, now let me take you back to economic rent. With economic rent, there's nothing like this abnormal situation. Everything is normal. You have S. Now, let me take you back because we did it. You have O, or we have SS. SS is a normal supply curve, slanting upward from left to right. Just draw a normal supply curve. We've done that before. Okay? Now, along that line, what does that line mean? That's what you need to understand. That SS curve that moves smoothly from left to right, climbing, like you're climbing, a mountain or whatever. But it's smooth now. Now that line tells you that the supplier is ready to supply at the price. Now you ask SS curve. Once you pick it, call that E1. It's not equilibrium. Please don't call it E. because E stands for equilibrium. Call that small a. Small a is on the SS curve. It's a point on the SS curve. Now that small a, from that small a, draw broken lines down to OQ line, quantity line. Draw broken lines. So that'll give you QA. And then go back to that small a, draw broken lines to the going leftward. We call that going westward, going leftward, okay? To touch the price axis. Call that PA. So what does this mean? It means that at point A, which you are considering, the corresponding quantity of good that the supplier is to supply is QA. You can read it. If you have a graph paper or whatever, you can read it. Maybe 100, maybe 50, maybe whatever. Okay? Now, and then go back to A. Move leftward to P. You have PA. In other words, the supplier is ready to supply QA goods or good, the quantity QA of this good, if the demander is ready to pay the price PA. Of course, when you look at the origin, that's zero. When you look, you move up the price line, you have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then you get to PA, then you have 7, 8, 9, for example. So in this case, if the demander or consumer, I like using demander because that's slightly different in meaning. If the demander is ready to pay 6 naira 50 kobo per unit of this good, then the supplier is ready to supply QA units. Okay? So now we'll move from A to equilibrium. Now, what's equilibrium price? What's equilibrium quantity? Equilibrium means that when you say at equilibrium, I am demanding for a good, then the supplier is supplying a good. The two of us have reached equilibrium. Means that we have reached agreement in English. Have we reached agreement? Yes. What's the agreement? Agreement is I'm going to pay 6 naira, 66 naira 50K on 50 units of good. So good times 6 naira 50K, that gives me this much. So I count the money or I transfer the money to this man's account and it gives me 50 units of good. We have reached agreement. That's English. We have reached equilibrium, that's economics. So now, when we reach equilibrium at PA, what does that mean? It means that if I wanted to buy 1 unit, I'll pay PA price. That is 6 naira 50K in our example. If I wanted to buy 2 units, I'll pay 2 times 650. If I wanted 3 units, I'll pay 3 times 650. If I want QE, then I'll pay QE unit times PE. Now, by so doing, I have cheated myself. I have cheated myself, not knowing I've cheated myself. Because the supplier was ready to accept a price that is less than the equilibrium I paid him. And that difference will form a triangle. We call that triangle T1. And that triangle T1 is what we call economic rent. That is, I have foolishly paid to the supplier more than the supplier was ready to accept. But I didn't know it. For example, you go to buy, say you go to buy a t-shirt from the seller at Yaba. Now the t-shirt will, the seller will say, okay,
100 naira from here.
please, can you please, okay. Now, if you follow, if you are listening, I am going to Yaba to buy a shirt. I tell myself, if I find a good shirt that is 500 naira, I'm going to buy it. Then the seller, understand, I took my decision without the seller knowing. If I find a good shirt for 500 naira, I'm going to pay for it and buy it. Then the seller will sit down in the morning and pray, God, I have this shirt. If I find anybody, just send somebody to me. If he buys it for 300 naira, then I'll be very glad to sell it because I bought it 150 naira. So if I sell it for 300 naira, that is, I've made 150 naira profit on it. I'll be very happy. Now, the seller is praying, you don't know. You are praying, the seller doesn't know. And somehow go to market and meet this seller. He says 1,000. I say, no, look, 500, 400. I say, no. Look, pay 600. I say, no. Things are very okay. Now I'm serious. If you want me to buy this, I'm going to buy it for 500 now. And what is it? Don't you know things are this and that and that? Understand, he paid, he prayed to God to send somebody who will buy it for 300 now. You have offered 500 now. He doesn't want you to know he's happy. He's saying, no, things are very hard. Okay, make it 600. I say, no. If you don't know, students don't have money. I'm a student of university. I don't have money now. So either you take 500 naira or I go. So, okay, because you're a student, pay 500 naira. Remember, he prayed and told God he was ready to sell it at 300 naira. But you didn't know. Now, you have paid 500 naira. The two of you have agreed. You are at equilibrium. You have reached agreement. You say, okay, since you're a student, just give me 500 naira. But next time I'll not sell it for 500. You say, no problem. So now he has taken the 500 naira and he has given you the shirt. As you leave the shop, you will start dancing. Say, God, I thought I would sell this for 300 naira, but you've sent somebody who has bought it for 500 naira. So I've made 200 naira extra on this shirt. That is, I thought I would sell it. I was ready to sell it for 300 naira. But this man has offered 500 naira. So that 200 naira in this example is part of what we call economic rent. So it has nothing to do with supply being scarce or supply being this or supply being temporarily that. Do you get the point? So when you add all those economic rents, you add them together, and then you have a framework like this. We call that economic rent. Okay? So any other question? Is there any other question? Okay. Any other question? All right. So write internal economies of production. Internal economies of production. Economies of production are called economies of scale of production. Okay. So internal economies of scale of production or internal economies of production. Now, let me give you a background. Economies of production may be divided into two major parts. The first part is internal economies. The second part is external economies. Okay? Economies of scale may be divided into two. External economies, internal economies. You can start with internal and end up with external. Now, what do we call economies of scale? Economies of scale are the benefits we derive as a result of expansion in production. When we increase production, there may be some benefits we derive from that, simply because we have increased production or we have expanded. Those benefits are called economies of scale. But it is not always benefits. If we are not careful and we just expand anyhow, that expansion may cause us harm. It's just like eating. When you eat, you derive some satisfaction. But when you go beyond a point, then the satisfaction that's supposed to have derived turns negative. It becomes dissatisfaction. You start vomiting. Just imagine you eating 2 plates of rice and you're okay. And then somebody gives you another plate of rice with very big pieces of chicken. And it says the condition is you don't keep this. You eat now. You tell him you are full, you are going to eat it. You say, no. If you want to eat it now, or I take it away. Then you say, look, foolishly, you say, I don't want to miss these big pieces of chicken and whatever. So I'm going to take the pain of eating this, even if I have to vomit. So you start forcing yourself to eat because your eyes are on the big pieces of chicken. By the time you finished, you can't even get up. You can't drink water. And then, before you know it, start throwing up. You start vomiting. Why are you vomiting? You are vomiting because you've eaten more than you were supposed to have eaten. Now, who forced you to eat? It is your thought of losing the big pieces of
I have a
chicken
question.
that made you
I have a question.
overeat. And now you are vomiting.
I
If
have
you are
a
not
question.
careful, they will take you to hospital. We've seen people like that who even die because of overeating. You have people like that, okay? So the same thing applies to production. You are producing something. You don't just produce foolishly, and that's why we do calculations. So when you produce and more people are asking for your good, you want to produce more. Now, in the process, you may reap, R-E-A-P, you may reap or rake in benefits. We call these benefits economies of scale. These benefits may be divided into two. We have what we call internal benefits or internal economies of scale, or external benefits, external economies of scale. Now, let's talk about internal economies of scale. Internal economies of scale are cost-saving benefits or advantages enjoyed by a firm as a result of producing in large quantities. Of course, producing a good, or a service in large quantities. Now, these economies include labor economies, technical economies, commercial economies, marketing economies, managerial economies, that's economies derived from better management, financial economies. You go to the bank, now they know you, they will, of course, you want to take a loan from a bank. Now that they know you, before you used to take 5%. They used to give you at 5%. Now the manager knows knows you're a good businessman, so he will give you at 4%. So that 1%.
I have a question.
What's the question?
So please, can you explain that internal economies of scale and economies of scale? I don't understand
Internal
it very
economies
well.
of scale and return. Now, economies of scale is like the human being. Internal economies of scale is like your right hand. External economies of scale is at your left hand. So economies of scale may be broken into two, may be divided into two. You have external economies of scale, you have internal economies of scale. It's a very simple thing. Okay? Internal economies of scale.
Okay, sir.
Plus external economies of scale will give you economies of scale or total economies of scale. But we don't say total economies of scale. We say economies of scale. Yeah. Okay? So
okay,
now,
sir.
what you have mentioned up to financial, then you have risk-bearing economies, then you have welfare economies, then you have research and development, plus some others. All these fall under internal economies of scale. Okay? Now, we are going to talk about now, at a level, we are not going to break this down. When you get maybe to 200 level, we start breaking them down. But just know there's something called economies of scale. In your mind, call it total economies of scale. But don't write total economies of scale. Total economies of scale can be divided into two, internal and external. Okay, just know that. Internal economies of scale, labor, technical, these are economies of scale that you gather from within the firm, from the factory. External economies of scale are from outside. Okay? Just like you have a house, once you enter your house, you are in. But once you get out to the premises, that you can get out to the veranda now. You are not in the house anymore. You're outside, but that's part of the premises. Yes, somebody had a question? Any question? Okay, no question. Internal economies of scale may be divided into labor, technical, commercial, managerial, risk-taking, etc. They're from within. Now, subheading, external economies of scale. External, EX, TERNAL, external economies of scale. Now, these are benefits that accrue to a firm as a result of the firm's localization, L-O-C-A-L-I-Z-A-T-I-O-N. Z-A-T-I-O-N, as a result of the place where the firm is operating. We call that localization. For example, a firm is in Ikeja. Another firm is in, say, Ijebu-Ode, for example, Ogun State. Now, the firm in Ijebu-Ode may gain some advantages around which the firm in Ikeja may not benefit from. On the other hand, the firm in Ikeja may benefit from external economies of scale, which the firm in Ijebu-Ode may not be, because of localization, because of where the firm is located. Okay, some of these benefits include development of skilled labor force. Two, provision of common services. If you have telephone services, fax services, these services, internet services, etc. Now, where do you think? Where do you think one firm is in Ijebu-Ode, another firm is in Ikeja? Which firm do you think will benefit from provision of common services more? Generally, the firm at Ikeja would benefit more. Generally, not all the time, not always. Then the next point is development of organized markets. Development of organized markets. Development of subsidiary firms. So these are external, part of external economies of scale. Again, I warn you that it is not always positive, it's not always benefits. When you produce and produce and produce and go beyond the limit, then it becomes counterproductive. The benefits you gained will turn out to be losses now. Will turn out to be, it's just like a child growing up. When a child grows up, everybody's happy. Okay, 1.5 meters tall, every other part, fine, no problem. Then the child gets to 2 meters tall, say, it's going to be good at basketball and we are going to make millions, etc. Then the child grows to 2.5 meters tall. People start wondering, what type of a child is this one? Why 2.5? And then before you know it, he's 3 meters tall. Everybody start running away from him. Why is it so? It's so because the child has grown up past the level people consider normal, acceptable. So the benefits of playing basketball or being tall or being this or being that will turn negative once that point is exceeded. Okay? You are 2 meters tall. Yes, that's very good. You can play. Once you get to 2.5, 3 meters tall, people start running away. So those benefits that come with height will be lost because you've gone beyond the height people think is normal. So the same thing applies here. Now, you have benefits accruing to a producer as a result of large-scale production. But once you go beyond a limit, those benefits become a cost or costs. Okay, we'll see that very well or better when we discuss costs of production. Okay, when we are reaping the benefits of large-scale production or economies of scale, the average cost curve falls. It falls until it bottoms out. That means until it changes course. Like a U. Look at one side of you, you're coming down, you get into the valley, and then you start going up. From the side where you come down until you get into the valley. That's the side of economies of scale. From the side where you start climbing up now, that's the side of diseconomies of scale. So I'm going to discuss our next week. Manager of a firm is when your average total cost curve gets down to the bottom. It cannot go down anymore. Now you have changed course to start climbing up. Stop. That is the maximum production, all things being equal. That's the maximum output you must get from that firm. If you go beyond that, you have enter the region of diseconomies of scale. I hope that's clear. Any question on that? Any question? Okay.
No, sir.
Now, right, law of diminishing returns. Law, L-A-W, law of diminishing returns. It's also called law of variable proportions. Law of variable proportions. S. Law of variable pro. Let me give you a general idea. The idea is this. I told you have 4 factors of production. But generally, we will manipulate, we'll use mathematics on labor and capital. Why is it so? Managerial ability, most of the time, are not given to simple calculations. Okay? We have land, you have labor, you have capital, you have entrepreneurship or managerial ability. So managerial ability is not given to simple calculation. So at your level, we don't calculate using that. And then land is considered fixed. Okay? So generally, we keep it fixed. So what we are going to vary at your level up to when you get to 400 level, anyway, would be labor and capital. So, you know, capital, we said, is physical capital. The amount of money we spent to acquire physical capital, you know, it's called finance capital. But now that physical capital is the machines, the buildings, the infrastructure we have acquired. Okay? So, for example, if I have 2 buildings, I can manipulate the number of cartons of the good we are producing into that building. For example, I say, okay, let's put 100 cartons in one building. Once we put 100 cartons of our product in one building, realize there's space. We can add cartons of our good into that shop. I mean, into the building. And then we add more until we shouldn't add anymore. Now, if we keep on adding, what will happen? Spare space will be occupied, will be used until there's no spare space anymore. If we force ourselves to add cartons into that building, that we will not be able to pass, because when we keep cartons of whatever, we need somebody, a storekeeper, who would go say, okay, we have this number of, this number of cartons here for this good, this number for this brand, this number for this one. So there must be some space so that people can go in and out and get the things and bring them out, and etc. So you cannot just, for a fixed thing, you cannot just keep on adding cartons in a fixed. Our shop or our house is fixed. So the amount of cartons of goods we want to keep in that would be fixed. If we go beyond that, then we're not doing the right thing. Now, why do we need to know the number of cartons we want to send to that place, to that shop, or to our store, or whatever? Because of tomorrow. If we are producing more and then we feel that this place is inadequate, then we have to build another one, or we have to expand this one, etc., etc. So we're going to consider some factor fixed, and then we're going to consider some factors variable. Now, the variable factors are what we are going to use mathematics to calculate, because we want the maximum, the minimum, the this, because all these are associated with costs. And these costs will eat up into our profit, because profit is equal to total revenue minus total cost. So if we don't control cost, then that'll be too bad. Our profit will be reduced, given total revenue is constant or fixed. So it is time now. Just remember, we'll start from the law of diminishing returns. I've given an example. We're going to get into the economics of that, and then we're going to plot some graphs, and then
I beg, you know the title for that graph that the teacher plotted. Is it done? I don't understand.
That has ended. He has gone. Sayonara.
He has done.